shows up on Twitter. Sure does. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us here for the ViaMonstra office hours, our weekly hour where you can ask questions about basically anything related to MDT, ConfigMgr, Intune, OS deployment, PowerShell, Windows in general. Good stuff. Systems management, shorthand. My name is Johan, and I'll be your host for the next hour. I absolutely love questions. If you have any, please either use the Q&A function for those of you that are attending the live Zoom meeting. For those of you that are using the live stream, I'm monitoring those chats in a window up here, and I will be able to see comments on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, but not from Twitter typically. So I do try to keep an eye on that one as well as we go by the hour, but by all means. First, a little quick announcement. Tomorrow, we are doing a free mini course on the Academy on how to build the perfect lab environment for ConfigMgr. So basically, an hour and a half starting at 9 a.m. Central Time, setting up everything that you need, hardware, networking, and of course then spin up a lab environment, deploying the various servers, and also spend some time on what we can do in post-deployment configurations. So this is a repeat of the session that we did in, I believe it was early December last year, Q4, but this one happens tomorrow, Thursday, and the price is just right for this one. It's free to attend, but it's a good show. Now, that being said, do you guys have any questions for me? Please use the Q&A function here in Zoom. Please comment on YouTube, Twitter, and YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And I'll be able to see those here as well. I'll be waiting for the questions. It's sure been an exciting start of 2022. You might heard about the January updates that were released, not just for client that kind of broke VPN for some, but also for servers where they were re-releasing those updates after about 5-6 days. I think they came out either yesterday or the day before yesterday, like an out-of-band update for the initial security update that could cause a little bit of headache for Hyper-V machines and domain controllers and some other things that I forgot. But it's been an exciting start of the year for sure. Autopilot was apparently down this morning for a bit. Seems like coming back now nicely. Saw a tweet from Michael Niehaus earlier that his blog post on how to troubleshoot that particular error suddenly got like 1,000 visits in just a few hours. So that's usually an indication about something being up a little bit. See if I can find that. That was actually a good read. Seen it before. Luckily, Mr. Niehaus is easy to find. So this was the particular tweet from this morning. Here. Wrong window. This one here. All right. I have a little Stream Deck next to me, allowing me to change and reposition things in the stream. So that's pretty cool. But this blog post was the one that the error people were seeing this morning and got a lot of hits, but it turned out to be actually an issue with the help service in Autopilot that related to Autopilot. So hopefully it's gone now, but that was something that showed up early this morning in the Twitter stream. But any questions at all, I'll be happy to answer whatever questions you might have. Those of you that are using VMware, that was a new release of VMware Workstation that added a pretty critical fix for Windows 11 deployment. For those of you that are trying to test that one out, well, by all means, get that version. I believe it was 16.12 or something like that of the version, if I remember correctly. Also, I have to admit, as a big StarCraft fan over many, many years, it's quite cool to hear the announcement yesterday that Microsoft/Xbox acquired Blizzard Activation or Activation Blizzard to get those games under their umbrella as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I probably will have a good excuse on finally getting another Xbox. Uh, see those games being available there as well. Hopefully, we'll see. We'll see. Quite a buy, I have to say. All right, any questions at all? I think this might be very well the first live stream where I haven't had a few questions coming in the very beginning. Yeah. Well, I mean, if there are no questions today, this is going to be a fairly short office hour. I'll be happy to demonstrate anything you might have questions about, or just a general discussion on things that you might be uh, on your way to configure and embark on new projects. Something that's been quite interesting this year is that among all the different courses we had on the academy, it has been the Intune one that has been the most popular ones for the last year, and not just popular by a little, popular but quite a bit. See a significant increase in the interest of Intune training, Intune configurations, Intune work in general, uh, compared to just a year ago, year and a half ago. So that's pretty cool. So, Andreas, yep, Happy New Year to you as well. Thank you for that. We are having troubles. Let's see. We're having trouble with clients configured for co-management not showing up in the Intune portal. Let's see. Oh, they are showing up as not as co-managed, but they're showing us as config manager only. What would be the best way to troubleshoot that issue? Um, I mean, in general, if I log into one of my tenants, and go to devices, if they show up as co-managed, sorry, config manager only, that typically means that for whatever reason, config manager thought these were tenant attached only. So they are being managed by config manager exclusively. And even if you would go to one of these devices and try to do any of these preview operations on it, it's config manager that does the job. Intune just tells the site server that informed the client to, hey, it's actually time to run a script or a pivot query or something. As to why they not show up as co-managed, even if they are, I actually haven't seen that. Um, not really sure where to start troubleshooting that one. I mean, there are a few log files related to the co-managed state on the client, the notifications and whatnot. Maybe start with those. See if I can find a good listing here. Give me a second. This one is pretty good. Bring it up on the screen here. Possibly start to peek into these log files and see if anything stands out on those devices, why they're not reporting correctly and reporting their capabilities, whatnot. So maybe that. I'll put this one in the chat window for you guys. Let me give it a second. Here we go. By all means, if any of you in the call have stumbled across this and have an idea, feel free to put it in the chat. I'll be happy to share the information. Seen a few threads on Reddit touching the area as well, but nothing like really concrete for this specific error. So maybe start with this one and see where that takes you. The log files are always your friend when troubleshooting most things related to ConfigMgr and also Intune for that matter. All right, let's see what else. Ari, yep, Happy New Year to you also. Thank you. Do you by any chance know any community tool that will handle the ConfigMngr apps migration from one ConfigMngr device to another ConfigMngr device? That tool will come in handy for machine VDI replace scenario. No, I haven't seen any tool from either Microsoft or third party that will actually migrate the application installations. User state migration tool and similar solutions, they migrate application data and settings, but you still need to make sure that the same apps are installed on the new machine in a replace scenario. What I have seen some customer doing to simplify this is to either use a database. Let's see if I have one here I can show. Maybe this one here. And this was popular maybe a decade ago when we did a lot of XP to Windows 7 migrations, but these techniques, they still work. And the concept is basically even for config deployment, you use a separate SQL database. You have to pay for it. It's not included to use MDT anymore. It used to be, but it's not. And you can do a package mapping or you can do an application mapping table where you basically define that, all right, for these computers, you're supposed to have the following apps, and they're supposed to be mapped this way. If the old machine had this app, the new machine should have this, and it's usually based on hardware inventory information. So that would be one way. We can still identify and read up on some of these older solutions for that. Two customers that I've worked with, they did a slightly similar approach when wanted to make sure that machines were being re-imaged for whatever reason, always got the same applications in them. And this particular scenario, they did something a little bit different, quite elegant, but a little bit different. They actually used Active Directory groups to assign applications in ConfigMngr. And as you know, in AD, ConfigMgr can happily use groups and collections and enumerate them, members, computers. It's a little bit delayed, but it can be done. But what about OS deployment? You re-image the same box. You don't want to have the user to log in and then spend hour and a half waiting for those applications to eventually come down again. You want to deploy them as part of your sequence. So what they were doing, they were creating software groups or application groups in AD. And in each of these groups, they borrowed an unused attribute, admin description. This is not the normal description that you have here. This is a different one. And they used it to identify, okay, members of this group, what would be the app in ConfigMgr? So this is for an application model app. They use this one. And for, let's see, packages, they use the PKG and the package ID and the program name. So basically, they told Active Directory that if you're a member of this particular group, you should have the following applications. And the sequence itself, if it gets a list of this, it will happily use it. So we added up a web service that allows you to enumerate those machines or that information from AD. So there is an AD web service that I put together. See where I have that link. Forgot what I called it. AD web service something. .amsmx maybe. Nope. AD web service. ConfigMgr SMX. That was a different one. But I had a web service that allowed you to list computers or applications and packages for different computers. Where did I add that one? Pretty sure it was in this environment. App list. That sounds like promising. Let's try that one. Beautiful thing about doing stuff live. Yeah, this one. So this is a web service where you simply have the sequence, ask it, say, hey, I'm at this particular computer. What applications am I supposed to have? In this case, it returns and say, yeah, you're supposed to have Skype. Or it will be, okay, on this computer, what legacy packages am I supposed to have? And it will list that. Did I type the computer name wrong? I did not. That machine was probably not a member of that group. 7-zip that I looked at. Yeah, 7-zip. It is a member. Probably messed something up there. The application worked nicely though. Did that one. All right, I have to figure out that one, but you get the idea. You have a web service that lists what they're supposed to have and assign the same one to the machines. And if you go to the sequences, even the default sequence, when doing the integration, will have ready-made actions to support a list of apps and a list of applications. So as long as the sequence, I think I have one here that I was using for this. Maybe not. Not. All right. Anyhow, you would have to add in a script at some point prior to these actions that queries the web service to figure out what application it's supposed to have. I did write out a blog post about it a while back, how to do this. So this is step-by-step instructions on how to get it going, how to set it up, the scripts you can download and use. So it's a pretty cool way to assign apps as part of your imaging process, basically. I'll put that in the chat for you. All right. There is a link also here to post by Jürgen as a similar solution, but using client-side scripting. It's also pretty cool. Another way to deal with apps this way is to use roles in your deployments. So you will basically use, again, a separate database, separate tables, and you define different roles for different machines, and you assign computers to different roles. So this computer, you will assign it to a given role or multiple roles in this case. And these roles will define not only the settings that that machine is supposed to have, naming convention, organization name, regional settings, whatever you can think of, but you can also add in Configment apps in here. It says Configment 2012, but it works with all config versions, including current branch. And you also have config packages. Because that way, if you assign apps this way for imaging, if you reimage that machine or you need to move that to a new machine and just add that to the same role, it will get the same apps. So that's what I've seen. There was a link there from a third-party vendor, Flexera. They had a clone migrate operation solution. I have not tried that one, but if that one works for you, fantastic. The stuff that I showed you is just either community-driven or part of the MDT integration in ConfigMgr. Awesome question. Thank you. All right. Let's see if there are any questions on the feed. Nothing yet, it looks like. All right. Any other questions? Any questions at all? Here we go. Are you aware of a tool to migrate apps from ConfigMgr to Intune in an automatic approach? Yes, I do. The one I was looking at recently was from our friends at Clydeway. So Ben Whitmore, he put together a tool for migration. I think it's Ben Bytes on Twitter. Let me see. Right, Ben, close enough. So this gentleman here, come on, copy and paste. How hard can it be? He put together, let's see where he put that one. Probably up on MS Endpoint Manager. we go. So this is obviously runs your PowerShell, but it allows you to take ConfigMgr apps and migrate them over to Intune in bulk, basically. Using CSV files in the middle to do this, but this beats creating them manually by a lot, because that could be hundreds that you need to migrate. So I will put this one up there. Trond, the guy behind a lot of the automation frameworks, he also have some posts on that. Let's see if I can find him. Oh. So this gentleman here recently posted some solution for this as well. See if I can find that. Yeah, these two posts are very similar to this, because they are also on how to create applications automatically, typically using Nikolai Anderson's module for this in the back end. But this is a good read as well, for sure. So I'll put his blog up in the chat. Front blog. Let's see. I have done some additional scripting on my own. I don't think I ever published those, but if you want a copy, reach out and I'll be happy to share. But it's basically been around spinning up test packages when needed. See if I have any of those. Not here. Yeah. So this is a PowerShell script I put together that basically loops through a folder. In this case, a package source folder with a bunch of apps, 18 of them, and script them in and creates test applications that I've been using in Intune. So it's just a for each loop, and it creates 18 packages in Intune by running this script. So it's not the most elegant, but it works. So on my Intune portal here, it's over here. If I go to my applications and search for peer-to-peer, this is where you see those apps. I did not create them manually. It was just the PowerShell script that went ahead and created those. And when I've been doing testing, I'll also be using scripts to modify these packages automatically. For example, to change like DO settings on them, background, foreground, and things like that. So PowerShell and Graph is magical in this aspect, what you can do. And I'm actually using Nikolai's module here to do this. It's not something I've written myself. So good stuff. All right. There was another question regarding application migration. What's the suggested way to migrate Configment agents from an old 2012 environment to a new Configment environment? I usually just reinstall those clients, especially if you're going from such an older version to a new version. So that would be a complete uninstall and a reinstall of the new client. You can have a PowerShell script that does that you actually initiate from the old environment even, if they are still managed by that environment, and then simply force it to go to the new site. I think that is easier than trying to redirect them with policies and just hacking in that the site code or whatever. It's also a good experience to actually do a clean install of the client and get them over. That's how I prefer to do it. It's not the only way, but it's simple enough. The clients don't even notice. It's just a script running in the back end that does this. The challenge is usually to do a good cleanup of the old client. ConfigMgr has a habit of sometimes even when you run the uninstaller, it still doesn't really do it all. So I have been using, see where I put that one. I've been using PowerShell scripts to, in addition to do the uninstall, to actually loop through and make sure I get rid of everything from the old client when I'm at it before installing the new one. This is something you can also use for troubleshooting clients that are definitely uh, not behaving. Most times a ConfigMgr uninstall will just do the job and everything is perfect, but sometimes you actually have to motivate it a little bit. Uh, so yeah, maybe that. I have them up on my GitHub repo actually. Yeah, here's the one. I'll put that in the link as well for you. And here we go. If clients are being redirected to the old site, make sure you don't have overlapping boundaries. That is usually the most common thing that can happen. And sometimes you have to basically remove the pointers in DNS, in AD and whatnot, so that clients found a new home. You can also specify the site code, of course, but make sure they don't get reassigned to the old one after a while, because that can happen. Um, Sometimes you kind of have to remove the publication and whatnot to get a smooth migration and go side by side or something for the boundaries. I mean, it's a shameless plug, obviously, but we do spend quite some time on ConfigMgr health in these different courses we have on the platform. So if you're not happy with how clients are behaving in your environment, that's definitely a good one to attend. It's me and Mr. Andrew that are running this course, and it starts next week for the Q1 series. So anyhow, any other questions? Chat real quick. Uh, Johan is commenting on Facebook there, not me, another Johan, that the good old CCM cleaner from ConfigMgr 2007 still working. That's pretty cool. I actually did not know that, but that's good to know. Thank you for that little tip. Awesome. Yeah, some of these classic tools are pretty awesome. I'm not sure if you can see, it's kind of in the background, but behind me, I have three classics. I have a Star Wars poster in the middle, but up here, there is an empty workstation CD, and in that corner, I have an SMS1 CD from back in the dark ages, or 1.2 actually. So classic still works. Uh, yeah, it also mean I'm very old, obviously. At the same time, it's how it goes. All right. Thank you for that, Johan. Appreciate it. All right. Any other questions or comments? We have a whopping 22 minutes to spare. Ross is asking on YouTube, do you have any tips for deploying feature upgrades? We often find basically a lot of failures, sometimes even up in the 5–10% of failure rates. Uh, yes, I have plenty. It will basically take a day to go through them all, but in general, what the goal should be, in my maybe not so humble opinion, is to reach um, about 2% failure rate uh, for in-place upgrades. I have only been able to achieve this by using sequences to do my upgrades. And I have worked with a bit over 100 some organizations over the years doing in-place upgrades. And sequences has been the key for those. It's not the only way, as you know. You can do in-place upgrades through Intune. You can use servicing plans in ConfigMgr to do upgrades. But what I see for organizations that try to go that route is usually they have higher failure rates unless they start to implement routines that are similar that you would do with sequences. Maybe do a little bit of work beforehand, do a little bit of work during the upgrade, and do a little bit of work after the upgrade. So for those two different approaches, first of all, I like to mention that Adam Gross, uh, his organization is using servicing plan, but he is, let's see, older one. I was hoping to find a newer one. Might be this one. Nope. I'm gonna search his blog. I'm gonna search it when I find the search button here. That did not go too well, but it took me to the post though. That's always something. So you can use a ConfigMgr baseline, and you can download that baseline from this blog that allow you to do configurations for servicing plans to make them better. For example, you will have jobs that are copying down drivers that you're being fed into the upgrade process. So for those of you wanting to do servicing plans, this is a good post. No, it's a great post, in fact. So I put that in the chat for you. But other than that, I prefer the sequence approach. And not just one, I use multiple. I have sequences that does validation only. Those are sequences that I push out prior to an upgrade. And their job is simply to make sure that the hardware is ready for it and that you can run through a simulated setup, basically doing setup without doing the actual upgrade. And that will check a lot of compatibility settings. And I'm also using this from the pre-cache content out there. So I'm pushing this out way before an upgrade, several days sometimes. And the purpose is again to get content out there and to make sure the machine can be upgraded. And this one I push out silently, that no progress bar, no nothing. I don't even need to tell the users. It is just like running in the background for this. So that works quite well. And then once machine have been validated, well, guess what? Then I will deploy the real upgrade that actually does the job. Because there is no point of trying to do an upgrade if you know beforehand it's going to fail. I have a guest here. I have to you away. Cat on the table. It helped me organizing the cables earlier before the stream. That was very helpful. But anyhow, this is what I recommend doing, and that allows me to achieve this goal typically. You will never get zero. That doesn't happen other than in a lab environment possibly, but there would always be machines that are breaking. But using sequences, you can indeed get closer to this. Without sequences, I found it very, very hard to do that. So the same thing. I mean, when you do stuff over and over again, eventually you learn what works and what doesn't. And for me, sequences has been good. So let's see what other questions there were. Great question, by the way. We have a lot of devices missing Apex applications on both virtual and physical machines. Was the suggested way to get the app applications installed from ConfigMgr? Well, ConfigMgr does support installation of offline Apex packages. It's one of the application types that it has. Maybe I have one here. Let's see. Not entirely sure. Well, I had one VLC player. So this is a binary that I have downloaded from the business store. That is, of course, as you know, going away now and being replaced by another store. I haven't seen the full integration in ConfigMan for that one yet, but I'm assuming it will show up. But if you look at the content here for this particular here, no, I just want to go to the folder. Thank you. How hard can it be? I simply went into the business store and I downloaded not just the app, but dependencies, the license, and whatnot. And then when I created my packages or applications in ConfigMgr, I simply specify that type for deployment. So ConfigMgr has this one, and that works okay to deploy apps. The challenge when doing offline deployments of apps has always been updates, that they don't kick in that automatically auto update when they're done. Like that, so I saw some community solution for it, but it's not something I have tried. But that has always been a little bit of a pain point with those apps, because you want them to auto update as normal store apps would. Maybe that's why they bringing in a new store that has better capabilities. I don't know. All right. There was a question on Facebook there. Do you have a prereq check for Windows 11 to abort if a computer is not compliant? Yes and no. I eliminate those machines before I start the upgrade. So basically, when pushing out the validation sequence, I have ready-made collections that looks on the result of that validation. So I deploy my validation sequence that either going to work or not work. And if the machine is not compliant, it's going to say this machine is not compliant, because that's setup as it setup does that. You can also have your own script that does that. Microsoft has published a few readiness scripts for Windows 11 that you can run, and you can parse the output of that script and fail the sequence if it's not fulfilling what it's supposed to be. And I'm looking for results code from my sequences. So my validation sequence has that is not a sequence, is it? Here is the sequence. So this particular sequence have a deployment ID of 6 David in the end here. And all deployments in ConfigMgr starts with the number 2 after the site code, so they're quite easy to recognize. Some organizations accidentally use the task sequence ID instead of the deployment ID, but you need that one. And then in my sequences, I have a ready or not ready collection. And in the not ready collection, I have a query here. But simply I'm looking for the result of that deployment and when it failed. So this is a sequence failing. So machines will be, when I push out my validation sequence, they will automatically end up in one of these 2 collections. And the one that failed the validation, they end up here. The one that actually passed, they are here. And it's to this set collection here, this is why I deploy my upgrade sequence. Because that way I can push it out very silently. I don't have to interrupt anyone. And I can filter out machines that are not compatible. Obviously, for testing purposes, you typically want to use virtual machines. And as you might have learned, that setup.exe and virtual machines and Windows 11 sometimes are not the best friends. For example, I have, in my opinion, what I consider a pretty shiny Hyper-V host. It's one of the best lab machines I've ever had, but it's 5 years old or 4 years old. And the CPU is not supported by Windows 11. So if I try to run a Windows 11 VM, it's like, no. I can do a bare metal of it, but I can't do an in-place upgrade of it. And even if I go into a VM, any VM, and flip on virtual TPM, it's going to be the wrong TPM. It's going to be a TPM that Windows 11 does not approve of. So what you can do is, of course, tell it to do it anyway. So there is a supported article. This is not intended for production. Let's see where I put that one. I added it into one of my posts here. I was adding some info on how to upgrade to Windows 11 using MDT because MDT has not yet been updated for it. And well, long story short, you can put in a registry key in here that will allow you to do in-place upgrades on VMs that are not supporting Windows 11 normally, but will. So there is even a link here to the sort of official documentation of this, but just I found it so valuable to test stuff in VMs, and I don't mind setting these keys in a lab environment, but I would not recommend doing this in production. So basically, if the CPU and TPM is not just on pair with Windows 11 like, you can convince it to upgrade anyway. Another comment there from Facebook, you can definitely use a front end as well that checks for certain things before you do a Windows 11 deployment. It's often easier to find out if the machine is compliant from within the Windows, from a full Windows when you do an upgrade. I haven't seen any good solutions to validate already from a WinP phase on the hardware side. I haven't tried to run that script in WinP, so maybe it works. We'll see. script was. Yeah, here. So this is the hardware readiness script. That was published back in the days. If this happens to work in WinP, you might be able to run it early and based on the result of this script, do it, but I have not tested. On the other hand, how difficult is it to try? Do it. I know you have a lot of machines running, but please start this one. I'm going to copy that script up to the server that I downloaded. Server here. Put it in the setup folder. Perfect. Go over to my client, F8. This one should have PowerShell. Tend to add that to all my boot images these days. And then net use up to that server. See what machine am I on or network. I'm on the wrong network. To be on the right network. All right, that should do it. Well, I'll be damned. The official hardware readiness script does seem to work in WinP because it returns not capable for this computer. I did not know that. Now I know. So Facebook, Johan, this could be something that you can run early on in a front end as a prereq check in the sequence and look for the result of these and abort or send up a friendly little message. Hey, this is not compatible. Please abort. Dennis is asking on YouTube, any words of wisdom for deploying BitLocker with keys being inside of ConfigMgr? Well, the new BitLocker management in ConfigMgr is effectively the replacement of MBAM. And that one still has both the support portal available and also the help desk, the self-service one for end users to get keys. For those of you that also have machines managed through Intune, you can get recovery keys that way as well. It's been available for a while now. So BitLocker management in ConfigMgr is a good way to be able to get the keys. The only real difference is the storage of those keys in the database. ConfigMgr hashed them, those recovery keys, or encode them, and the old MBAM did not. But you can use PowerShell scripts to decode them, assuming you have access to that database. I have seen a few scripts being published that does that. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward setup. Niall Brady together with Morris Daly, they have done some remarkably good posts on using BitLocker management. So on MS Endpoint Manager, if you search for BitLocker management, try to spell it somewhat correctly. There are some step-by-step guides on how to do this. So that would be a good start to read through some of this documentation. So I'll put that in the chat for you. All right. Looks like we are up on the hour here. And I see no more questions in the queue either. So that's a good timing. That being said, friendly reminder, if you want to join us tomorrow for our Perfect Lab course, I'll be happy to have you there. Starts at 9 Central Time. And as I mentioned before, it's just free to enroll, enjoy the course. And other than that, thank you so much for joining today, and I hope to see you guys either tomorrow or next week. Bye for now.